Let's take a look at this application of the do while loop. So we're going to make a program called canCount. And in this program, we are going to have a can drive for charity. So people will be donating cans. So in this case, we are going to need an integer value, which is going to be the can count. There are a couple different variable types that we're going to be using through this program. This one is going to be kind of our total. So we're going to initialize it as 0, and every time we add an amount of cans, we're going to add it on to the total. Then every time the user wants to enter a number of cans, we will have a variable that will receive it here. And then we're going to write a do while loop. So again, these start with do, open curly brace, hit enter, and then we're going to put the while condition. So what I want to set this up as is if the user enters a positive integer, it is going to add that amount of cans onto my can count. However, if they enter a 0, it is going to quit, and so it'll stop asking and give me a total. So what I want to do is I want to repeat this as long as they did not enter the end value. So in this situation, what I want to do is I want to go while the amount of cans does not equal 0. So while they did not enter a 0, I want to keep this thing going. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to prompt them for a number of cans. So let's just type in how many cans. And then a common way to do this is 0 to quit. And then I will set that up. I will read in my number of cans here. Now, what I'm going to do is every time I read in the number of cans, the can count is going to grow by the number of cans that they just entered. After the loop is complete, we are going to display the total. So cout total can count. And that is going to be our can count. Put an ANDL here. Okay, so we're going to run that program and take a look at how it functions here. Okay, so my program says how many cans, 0 to quit. So I'm going to put in 5, and then the next person donates 5, and then a 3, and then I'll put in my end value. And my total can count is going to be 13. So 5 plus 5 plus 3 is going to give me my 13. So we'll add a few features onto this. Also, just so I can demonstrate what some important variable types are when you are using while loops. So what I want to do is now I want to get an average. So I want to calculate an average per student that donated to this. I want to figure out, well, how many cans did that student donate? So we're going to need another value here, student count. And again, we're going to initialize that to 0 as well. And then what we're going to do is every time we ask for an amount of cans, we are going to increase the student count plus 1. So student count, will use our C++ shortcut, and student count plus plus will add 1 every time we get a donation. Okay, so now what I want to do is at the end, I am going to put in cout, I suppose the average per student, which is going to be the can count divided by the student count, and then we'll do an end L there. So that should give us an average. So now there's actually a problem deliberately programmed into this because this is a common error that shows up. So let's run this and we'll see what happens. Okay. So in our output, we've got how many cans? 0 to quit. So I am going to put 4 and 4 and 4. Okay, so you can probably figure out that the average of 4, 4, and 4 is going to be 4. So I'm going to put my end condition here and then hit enter. And then let's see what happened. I get my total can count being 12, but the problem here is that my average per student is listed as being 3, which is not correct. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at my program, trace the variables, and find out what happened here. So my how many cans, 0 to quit. Imagine that I entered 4 for the first time. So I'm going to enter a 4 here. Then my can count becomes 4 and my student count becomes 1. Great. Then I'm going to add in another 4, so this doesn't change. My total becomes 8 and my student count becomes 2. I put in another 4, my can count becomes 12, my student count becomes 3. Now what I want to do is I want to enter that the amount of cans is 0. So then it hits this line of code that adds 0 onto the 12, so that stays. But here's the problem, is that the student count now becomes 4. So after the while loop is complete, then what it does is instead of dividing 12 by 3 to give me the average of 4, it does 12 by 4, giving me an average of 3, which is not right. So occasionally in a loop, what you want to do is you want to make a condition where sometimes you do the normal thing and then sometimes you do something a little bit different. So the best fix to do for this is we don't always want to add on another student. So when we enter a 0, we are quitting. We are not actually adding on another student. So what we want to do here is we're going to wrap this all in an if statement. So if the amount of cans does not equal 0, then we want to do this thing. Now you may be taking a look at that and saying, well, why did we put this can count line in here if a 0 doesn't actually adjust the total? Well, it makes it more efficient because now that is a line of code that it does not have to run if they enter a 0. I realize the efficiency is minimal, but there you have it. So just to verify that this is working, I'm going to also add in a cout total student count so that we can verify that this is also working properly. So I'm going to run this. Okay, and then let's see what happens with my 4, 4, and 4, and then 0. Great. My can count is 12, my student count is 3, and then my average is 4. Okay. Now, we're going to add some notes to this because this program contains the 3 main variable types that we're going to use, and we're going to actually add one in too. Okay. One of the most common loop variables is called a counter, which is this variable here. So our counter, so this typically counts the number of loop Now we're going to use another word here, iterations. Iterations means like one pass through the loop. So a counter typically counts the number of loop iterations. So our student count essentially counts how many times we go through the loop. Each time we go through the loop, it represents one student. So usually the counter grows, grows by one or a predictable amount. Okay, now our canCount kind of works the same as a counter. However, it does not grow predictably, and it does not keep track of how many times we go through the loop. This is something called an accumulator variable. So accumulator variable grows to track values through the loop. That's pretty much its job. Now we're going to add in the third type. Now we're going to add on a variable for this. So const int, and we're going to use the term flag, and we're going to assign it the value 0. So this flag variable is called a flag, or sentinel. Some programming courses refer to as a sentinel. So this is essentially the end condition for the loop. So very commonly you're going to see while loops with this. So replace your 0 with the word flag at the end, and then our program is good. So throughout all of these loops, we're going to see accumulators, counters, and flags that help our loops run properly.